Nearly every country in the world is in debt. The United States today is at the highest level in its history, with debt exceeding $39 trillion. The European Union carries around 14 trillion, and Japan has close to 9 trillion in debt. Oil-rich countries, export giants, Germany, China, Saudi Arabia, all of them are in debt. This inevitably raises a question. If everyone has debt, who is the creditor? This is the financial historian, where money, power, and history intersect. And in this world, nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Debt is not just a burden. In fact, debt is the skeletal system that explains how the modern world stands on its feet. Wars, crises, economic booms, and collapses, all of them are built on this invisible structure. When you look at the source of debt, you arrive at a surprising conclusion. The world does not owe its debt to specific others, but to itself. But that does not mean everyone benefits equally. Today, total global debt has surpassed $315 trillion. This figure is roughly 3 times the size of the global economy. How did we get here? The answer takes us back centuries. The idea of national debt was not born with credit cards, but with wars. In 1694, England was at war with France, and the treasury had run out of money. The king borrowed from merchants. In return, he promised regular interest payments guaranteed by future tax revenues. To manage this system, the Bank of England was established. This was a critical turning point. The state could now spend money it did not yet have. Lenders, in turn, gained something extremely important: state backing, a promise that could be bought, sold, and transferred. This is how government bonds came into existence. Over time, this system spread to France, was refined by the Netherlands, and adopted by the United States to finance its war of independence and westward expansion. Debt was no longer a sign of weakness, but a symbol of credibility. A state that could borrow was a strong state. In the past, empires grew wealthy by conquering land. Today, they collect interest by issuing bonds. Battlefields have been replaced by balance sheets. In the modern era, debt has become a common language of the world. The U.S. debt stands at $38 trillion. Japan's debt exceeds its GDP by a wide margin. Global debt continues to rise, adding another $1 trillion every few months. Everyone is a debtor. Everyone is a creditor. People pay debt through taxes, while at the same time becoming creditors through pension funds. This is how the system works. Let's take the United States as an example. Roughly half of its $38 trillion debt is held by investors. Most of those investors are American. Banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The portion held by foreigners is around $9 trillion. Yes, China and Japan hold U.S. Treasury bonds. But the majority of U.S. debt is owed to its own people and institutions. Interest payments funded by taxes flow back into pension funds. It is a cycle. The debt is real, but the system keeps repeating itself. This cycle is not unique to the United States. Countries hold each other's debt. Developing nations store their reserves in the bonds of developed economies. Everyone holds someone else's paper. What prevents the system from collapsing is trust. The actors that influence this trust the most are the markets, large funds, central banks, investors. They decide who can borrow cheaply and who will struggle. When trust disappears, currencies collapse and governments fall. Central banks sit at the center of this system, because they do not just manage debt, they expand it by creating money. Every unit of money in circulation represents debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money. So what happens when trust runs out? We have seen it in Greece, Argentina, and Sri Lanka. When debt becomes unpayable, austerity follows. Taxes rise, unemployment grows, and the public pays the price. Yet the system continues. Old debts are restructured, new ones are issued. Because in the modern world, debt is not meant to be paid off, but rolled over. Governments do not plan to eliminate their debt. This is no secret. Old debt is paid with new debt. What truly matters is the ability to service interest and maintain trust. That is why government bonds are considered the safest assets in the world. If major countries were to fully pay off their debts, the global system would collapse. Money supply would shrink, and the economy would grind to a halt. Therefore, the goal is not to eliminate debt entirely, but to keep it portable and sustainable. But there is something that must not be forgotten. Interest income is not distributed equally. Debt is not only a transfer between countries, but also within societies. Most of the time it flows from the bottom upward, and in the end we see this. That is why, as debt grows, inequality grows with it, and in the end we see this. There is no single villain in this system. No single winner either. We are all part of it. Debt once meant bondage. Today it means balance. But if that balance breaks, we remember what debt truly is. A promise that is hard to keep. If what I've shared gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History holds the answers, and I'll show you where to find them.